It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Emily, a historian and amateur cryptologist, found herself standing at the gates of an old cemetery on the outskirts of a small New England town. This wasn't just any graveyard. It was the subject of local legend, a place whispered about in hushed tones for its gravestones marked with unusual symbols and cryptic carvings. The cemetery, overgrown and cloaked in centuries of neglect, seemed forgotten by time. Yet, to Emily, it was a treasure trove waiting to be unearthed. The iron gates creaked as she pushed them open, revealing rows of moss-covered gravestones tilted at odd angles, as if the earth itself had tried to reclaim them. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and the only sounds were the distant rustle of the wind and the occasional caw of a crow. Emily clutched her leather satchel, filled with notebooks, pencils, and a magnifying glass, tools of her trade. She had come here chasing a rumor that some of these gravestones held hidden messages, codes left behind by those who wished to communicate with future generations or conceal their secrets. Wandering among the stones, her eyes scanned the intricate carvings and inscriptions. Many bore the usual religious symbols, a cross, an angel, or clasped hands. But one stone caught her attention. It stood slightly apart from the others, its surface adorned with unusual imagery. A weeping willow, a crescent moon, and a cluster of stars. The symbols were exquisitely carved, their details untouched by time, as if the stone was meant to endure far longer than the others. Beneath the carvings was an inscription, barely legible beneath layers of moss and lichen. Emily knelt, gently brushing the stone's surface with her gloved hand, to reveal the faint script beneath. As the words came into view, she noticed something peculiar. Certain letters were etched slightly deeper or larger than the others, as if they were meant to stand out. She quickly pulled out her notebook and began copying the inscription, her heart racing. The message seemed like a riddle, one that defied immediate understanding. The deeper she looked, the more it seemed that this wasn't just a gravestone. It was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Beside the gravestone, half buried in the dirt, something glinted in the weak sunlight. Emily reached out, her fingers brushing against a cold, metallic object. She pulled it free, revealing an ornate silver locket, tarnished with age but still intact. The locket bore the same symbols as the gravestone, and when she opened it, a faint gasp escaped her lips. Inside was a miniature portrait of a young woman, her features delicate and her expression serene. Folded neatly behind the portrait was a tiny, yellowed piece of paper. Emily carefully unfolded it, revealing a single line of text written in an elegant, flowing hand. "Seek the willow's shadow at dusk." Emily's pulse quickened. The cryptic phrase felt like an invitation, an urgent call from the past. Her eyes darted to the willow tree carved on the gravestone. What could the shadow reveal? What had this person left behind, hidden beneath layers of time? The cemetery, which moments ago had felt still and forgotten, now seemed alive with untold stories. Emily tucked the locket and note into her satchel, her mind buzzing with possibilities. She glanced at her watch. Dusk wasn't far off, and she knew she had to stay. Whatever secrets this gravestone held, she was determined to uncover them. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows across the cemetery, Emily prepared herself for the next step. She stood by the gravestone, her eyes fixed on the intricately carved willow tree. The note's cryptic message, "Seek the willow's shadow at dusk," played over and over in her mind. The air grew cooler, carrying the earthy scent of damp leaves, and a strange stillness settled over the graveyard. She felt as though she was being watched, not in a menacing way, but as if the past itself was observing her, waiting for her to uncover its secrets. Emily's gaze moved to a large, gnarled willow tree near the edge of the cemetery. Its branches draped low, almost touching the ground, forming a curtain of leaves that swayed gently in the breeze. It seemed older than the graves themselves, its massive trunk twisted and scarred. The connection was unmistakable. This was the willow from the carving. But what shadow was she meant to seek? She walked toward it, her boots crunching against the gravel path, each step feeling heavier with the weight of anticipation. Reaching the willow, Emily stood beneath its canopy, the world outside muffled by the curtain of leaves. The light of the setting sun filtered through the branches, casting fragmented shadows onto the ground. She scanned the area, her eyes searching for anything unusual. Then, as the sun sank lower, the shadow of the tree began to elongate, creeping toward an unmarked patch of ground a few feet away. Her breath hitched as she noticed the shadow aligning perfectly with a faint depression in the earth. Kneeling down, she brushed away the layer of fallen leaves and debris, revealing a rectangular slab of stone embedded in the ground. It was smaller than a gravestone and lacked any visible markings, but its edges were too precise to be natural. Emily pulled out a small trowel from her bag and began digging around the slab's edges, the soil giving way more easily than she had expected. Within minutes, she uncovered enough to lift the stone slightly. With a deep breath, she wedged her fingers beneath it and pulled. The stone shifted, revealing a dark cavity beneath. Emily's heart pounded as she leaned closer, the faint smell of damp earth wafting up. Inside the opening lay a small wooden box, its surface worn but intact. She hesitated for a moment, the gravity of the discovery sinking in. Whatever was inside had been hidden here for decades, possibly centuries. Carefully, she lifted the box from its resting place, her fingers trembling slightly. The box was sealed with a simple clasp, which she opened with a soft click. Inside, she found a bundle of aged papers tied with a thin ribbon, along with a brass key and another folded note. The note, written in the same elegant hand as the one in the locket, read, "To those who seek, may the truth guide you." Emily's mind raced. What truth? What story was buried here, waiting to be revealed? She untied the ribbon and unfolded the papers, her eyes scanning the faded ink. What she read sent a chill down her spine. A letter, written by the woman in the portrait, detailing a family's betrayal, a hidden fortune, and a promise of redemption. The sun's last rays vanished below the horizon, plunging the cemetery into twilight. Emily sat in stunned silence, the weight of the past pressing heavily on her. Whatever she had just uncovered was more than a mystery, it was a legacy, one that demanded to be brought back to light. As the first stars began to appear in the evening sky, Emily took a deep breath and focused on the letter in her hands. The handwriting, though elegant, was strained in parts, as if the author had written it in haste or under duress. The letter began with a name, Margaret Elise Hawthorne, and the year 1793. Margaret's words were a plea, both heartfelt and desperate. She spoke of her family's once great fortune, amassed through trade and carefully guarded across generations. But tragedy had struck when Margaret's father fell gravely ill, leaving the family vulnerable. A trusted family associate, a man named Charles Abernathy, had betrayed them, seizing control of their assets through forged documents and deceit. Margaret had written the letter as her final act of defiance. She claimed to have hidden a key piece of evidence that could expose Abernathy's treachery, a document proving her father's true wishes and the rightful heir to the fortune. Her words were heavy with regret and hope as she begged whoever found the letter to use the enclosed key to uncover the truth and restore her family's honor. The key in the box, Emily realized, wasn't just a relic, it was a piece of this intricate puzzle meant to unlock a door to the past. But Margaret's letter didn't stop there. It mentioned another gravestone, marked with a cluster of stars and a single rose, where the evidence was said to be concealed. Emily's heart raced as she recalled seeing such a gravestone earlier in the cemetery. Margaret's final words struck a chord deep within her. The truth may lie buried, but it must never be forgotten. To those who seek, may courage guide your steps. Emily felt a wave of awe and determination wash over her. This wasn't just about uncovering hidden messages or solving a centuries-old mystery. It was about giving a voice to someone who had been silenced by betrayal and time. She glanced at the brass key in the box, its surface dulled by age but still sturdy. What door, chest, or hidden compartment could it open? And what secrets would it reveal? Guided by the letter, Emily rose and scanned the cemetery once more. The moonlight bathed the gravestones in a silvery glow, casting long shadows that seemed to point her way. She retraced her steps to the cluster of stars and the single rose, carved into a headstone not far from Margaret's own. This gravestone was simpler, less ornate, and partially obscured by creeping ivy. Clearing the foliage, Emily found a faint inscription at the base. "For those who remember, the past shall reveal itself." With a renewed sense of urgency, Emily inspected the area around the grave. The soil beneath the headstone seemed undisturbed, but the stone itself bore a small keyhole near its base, cleverly disguised as part of the design. Her hands shook as she inserted the brass key, turning it slowly until she heard a soft click. The front panel of the gravestone slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with Margaret's initials. The edges of the pages were fragile and discolored, but the ink within was still legible. Flipping through the journal, Emily discovered detailed accounts of Abernathy's schemes, including names, dates, and locations, everything needed to prove the Hawthorne family's claim. It was a treasure trove of evidence, carefully preserved and hidden for centuries. At the back of the journal was a folded map, marking a location Emily didn't recognize, but it appeared to lead beyond the cemetery. She sat back on her heels, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she'd found. Margaret hadn't just left behind a story, she'd left a roadmap to justice. Emily knew this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to follow the trail and ensure Margaret's voice was heard, even if it took her far beyond the quiet confines of the cemetery. Emily carefully tucked the journal and map into her satchel, her mind swirling with possibilities. The map's markings were cryptic, showing a location just outside the cemetery grounds. It hinted at an old Hawthorne family estate, which had long since disappeared from modern maps. If Margaret's claims were true, the estate could hold the final pieces of the puzzle. Emily felt an electric mix of excitement and apprehension. This wasn't just history she was unraveling. It was a story that still pulsed with life, one with the power to rewrite a family's legacy. Guided by the moonlight and her flashlight, Emily followed the map's instructions. The path led her through the cemetery gates and into the dense woods beyond. The terrain grew uneven, roots twisting beneath her feet and branches clawing at her jacket as she pressed forward. Her breath clouded in the cool night air, but she couldn't turn back now. Every step felt like an echo of Margaret's resolve, her determination to preserve the truth against impossible odds. After what felt like hours, Emily emerged into a clearing. There, partially hidden by overgrown vegetation, stood the crumbling remains of what must have been the Hawthorne family estate. The foundation was barely visible, but a single stone structure, perhaps an old cellar or storage room, still stood intact. Its doorway was sealed with a heavy wooden door, reinforced with rusted iron bands. Emily approached cautiously, the brass key from the cemetery clutched in her hand. Could it open this door too? She inserted the key into the lock, and with a hesitant turn, it clicked open. The door groaned as it swung inward, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. Emily hesitated at the threshold, the air cool and musty as it wafted up from below. Gathering her courage, she switched on her flashlight and began her descent. The narrow stone steps led her into a small chamber, its walls lined with wooden shelves. Most of the shelves were empty, but one corner of the room caught her attention. A weathered chest, bound with iron and sealed with yet another lock. Emily knelt before the chest, her heart pounding as she tested the key. To her relief, it fit perfectly. The lock gave way with a metallic snap, and she lifted the lid to reveal its contents. Stacks of documents, ledgers, and correspondence, all meticulously organized. Each piece bore the Hawthorne family crest, and the dates aligned with the events Margaret had described in her journal. But what caught Emily's eye most was a velvet pouch resting atop the papers. She opened it carefully, revealing a collection of gold coins, jewelry, and a signet ring that must have belonged to Margaret's father. Among the documents was a letter addressed to the future custodian of truth. It was written in Margaret's familiar hand, urging whoever found the chest to use its contents wisely. She had anticipated that her family's legacy might one day be forgotten or misrepresented, and she had hidden these items as both evidence and a safeguard. Margaret's words were filled with hope, despite the heartbreak she had endured. "To those who find this," she wrote, "may you honor the courage it took to protect what was right and just. The truth lies not only in these papers, but in the strength of those who choose to defend it." Emily sat back, the weight of the discovery pressing down on her. This wasn't just about a stolen fortune, it was about justice, resilience, and the enduring power of truth. The evidence she held could shine a light on a forgotten chapter of history, one that deserved to be remembered and celebrated. Margaret's voice, silenced for so long, had finally found a way to be heard. As Emily gathered the documents and treasures, she knew this was only the start of her journey. Margaret's story wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a call to action, one Emily felt deeply compelled to answer. With the chest's contents safely secured in her satchel, Emily emerged from the cellar into the cool night air, her heart still racing from the magnitude of her discovery. The moonlight illuminated the clearing, casting long shadows across the crumbling remnants of the Hawthorne estate. She stood for a moment gazing at the ruins, feeling the weight of the past and the courage of a young woman who had dared to defy an unjust fate. As Emily retraced her steps through the woods, her mind replayed the events of the evening. Margaret had gone to extraordinary lengths to protect her family's legacy, leaving behind a trail of symbols, letters, and hidden treasures to guide the right person to the truth. The journal, the map, the chest, everything had been meticulously planned, as if Margaret had known that someday someone like Emily would come along. Margaret's voice, carried across centuries, was now alive again, her story entwined with Emily's own. Back in the cemetery, Emily felt a strange pull toward Margaret's gravestone. She knelt before it, the locket still tucked safely in her pocket. The weeping willow and crescent moon carved into the stone now seemed less like mere decorations and more like a profound message, a symbol of resilience and the passage of time. Emily placed her hand on the cool stone, as if to silently thank Margaret for trusting her with this legacy. The cemetery felt different now, almost as if it had been watching, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. Emily wondered how many other gravestones held untold stories, symbols left behind by people who had lived, loved, and fought for what mattered most to them. These stones weren't just markers of death, they were monuments to life, each one holding the echoes of a story waiting to be heard. Emily made her way back to her car, the satchel heavy with history and purpose. The town's archives, historical societies, and museums would all be integral to piecing together the rest of Margaret's story. Emily felt a growing determination to share what she had found, not just the tangible evidence but the courage and spirit behind it. Margaret's legacy deserved to be remembered, not as a tragic tale of loss, but as a triumph of resilience and truth. As she drove away from the cemetery, Emily glanced at the satchel on the passenger seat, its contents a bridge between the past and the present. The journey wasn't over. Margaret's voice had been revived, but now it was up to Emily to amplify it, to ensure the world understood the courage of a woman who refused to let injustice define her family's story. For Emily, this wasn't just an academic pursuit anymore. It was a deeply personal mission. The mysteries she had uncovered tonight were more than puzzles to be solved. They were a testament to the enduring power of truth and the lengths people would go to protect it. Margaret had placed her faith in the future, in someone like Emily, to carry her message forward. And Emily would make sure that faith was not misplaced. With the chest's contents safely secured in her satchel, Emily emerged from the cellar into the cool night air, her heart still racing from the magnitude of her discovery. The moonlight illuminated the clearing, casting long shadows across the crumbling remnants of the Hawthorne estate. She stood for a moment gazing at the ruins, feeling the weight of the past and the courage of a young woman who had dared to defy an unjust fate. As Emily retraced her steps through the woods, her mind replayed the events of the evening. Margaret had gone to extraordinary lengths to protect her family's legacy, leaving behind a trail of symbols, letters, and hidden treasures to guide the right person to the truth. The journal, the map, the chest, everything had been meticulously planned, as if Margaret had known that someday someone like Emily would come along. Margaret's voice, carried across centuries, was now alive again, her story entwined with Emily's own. Back in the cemetery, Emily felt a strange pull toward Margaret's gravestone. She knelt before it, the locket still tucked safely in her pocket. The weeping willow and crescent moon carved into the stone now seemed less like mere decorations and more like a profound message, a symbol of resilience and the passage of time. Emily placed her hand on the cool stone, as if to silently thank Margaret for trusting her with this legacy. The cemetery felt different now, almost as if it had been watching, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. Emily wondered how many other gravestones held untold stories, symbols left behind by people who had lived, loved, and fought for what mattered most to them. These stones weren't just markers of death, they were monuments to life, each one holding the echoes of a story waiting to be heard. Emily made her way back to her car, the satchel heavy with history and purpose. The town's archives, historical societies, and museums would all be integral to piecing together the rest of Margaret's story. Emily felt a growing determination to share what she had found, not just the tangible evidence but the courage and spirit behind it. Margaret's legacy deserved to be remembered, not as a tragic tale of loss, but as a triumph of resilience and truth. As she drove away from the cemetery, Emily glanced at the satchel on the passenger seat, its contents a bridge between the past and the present. The journey wasn't over. Margaret's voice had been revived, but now it was up to Emily to amplify it, to ensure the world understood the courage of a woman who refused to let injustice define her family's story. For Emily, this wasn't just an academic pursuit anymore. It was a deeply personal mission. The mysteries she had uncovered tonight were more than puzzles to be solved. They were a testament to the enduring power of truth and the lengths people would go to protect it. Margaret had placed her faith in the future, in someone like Emily, to carry her message forward. The next morning, Emily found herself at the local historical archives, a modest brick building tucked into the heart of the town. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and varnished wood, a testament to centuries of preserved history. She approached the curator, an elderly gentleman named Mr. Grayson, who had a reputation for being both meticulous and passionate about local lore. Emily carefully placed Margaret's journal and the documents from the chest on the counter before him. Mr. Grayson adjusted his glasses, his eyes widening as he examined the items. "These are remarkable," he murmured, gently flipping through the journal's fragile pages. "This handwriting alone suggests authenticity, but these details, names, dates, even seals, these could rewrite part of our town's history." Emily shared everything she had discovered. The cryptic carvings, the locket, the map, and the hidden chest beneath the Hawthorne estate. As she spoke, Mr. Grayson's expression shifted from curiosity to awe. "Margaret Hawthorne's name has surfaced in local legends, but there's never been concrete evidence of her story. Some said she hid proof of her family's claim to a lost fortune, but others dismissed it as folklore. What you found here, it's extraordinary." They spent hours poring over the documents. Each ledger, letter, and map detail added another layer to the story of the Hawthorne family's rise and fall. Emily learned that Charles Abernathy had indeed seized the family's fortune, using forged documents to claim ownership of their estate and assets. However, the journal provided undeniable evidence of his fraud. It even hinted at a network of accomplices, suggesting that Abernathy's betrayal had far-reaching implications. One letter in particular caught Emily's attention. It was written in Abernathy's hand, addressed to an associate, and bore a phrase that sent chills down her spine. "Ensure the evidence remains buried, at any cost." The letter suggested that Abernathy had ordered the destruction of records that could expose him, but Margaret had outmaneuvered him by hiding the most damning documents. Emily realized the depth of Margaret's courage. She had risked everything to protect the truth. By afternoon, Mr. Grayson proposed a plan. "This discovery needs to be shared with the community. We can organize an exhibit, showcase the journal, the locket, and the chest's contents. Margaret's story deserves to be told." Emily nodded, feeling a swell of pride. This wasn't just about exposing Abernathy's deceit. It was about restoring the legacy of a family that had been wronged for centuries. Later that evening, as Emily prepared to leave the archives, she received a surprising visit. A young woman introduced herself as Clara Hawthorne, a descendant of Margaret's family. Word of Emily's discovery had already begun to spread, and Clara had come to learn more about her ancestor. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about Margaret," Clara said, her voice trembling with emotion. "She always believed Margaret's truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered." Emily showed Clara the journal and the other artifacts, and together they retraced the steps that had led to the discovery. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she read Margaret's words, her connection to the past deepening with each page. "You've given us something priceless," Clara said softly. "You've given my family its voice back." As the two women stood in the fading light of the archive room, Emily realized that this journey had transcended historical curiosity. It had become a bridge between generations, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the importance of remembering those who came before. Margaret's voice, silenced for centuries, had finally been heard, and her legacy was no longer buried in the shadows of the past. Over the next few weeks, Emily and Clara worked tirelessly to prepare an exhibit that would bring Margaret's story to light. The town's historical society offered its full support, eager to showcase this remarkable discovery. The exhibit, titled "The Legacy of Margaret Hawthorne, Truth Unearthed," was set to open in the town hall, drawing attention from historians, journalists, and descendants of families who had long lived in the area. Emily and Clara carefully curated the items for display. Margaret's journal, the locket, the chest and its contents, and the map leading to the Hawthorne estate. Each artifact was accompanied by detailed explanations, connecting the dots of Margaret's life and the injustices she had fought against. Emily also worked with local experts to authenticate the documents and reconstruct the timeline of events, ensuring that every detail of Margaret's story was preserved with accuracy. When the day of the exhibit arrived, the town hall was filled with an electric anticipation. People of all ages gathered to witness the unveiling of a forgotten chapter of their town's history. Clara stood beside Emily as they opened the event, her voice trembling but resolute. "Today we honor a woman who refused to let the truth be buried," Clara said. Her words met with nods and murmurs of agreement. Margaret Hawthorne's courage reminds us that the past is never truly gone. It lives within us, waiting to be rediscovered. As visitors explored the exhibit, whispers of amazement filled the air. The journal, with its heartfelt entries, drew many to tears, while the intricate carvings on Margaret's gravestone captivated others. Historians marveled at the evidence of Abernathy's schemes, and families who traced their lineage back to the 18th century found new connections to their own pasts. Margaret's story resonated deeply, not just as a tale of betrayal and resilience, but as a reminder of the importance of preserving history. The culmination of the event was the unveiling of a restored portrait of Margaret, created by a local artist based on the locket's miniature painting. It depicted her as she might have looked in life, strong, determined, and hopeful. The crowd erupted in applause, a standing ovation that echoed through the hall. For a moment it felt as if Margaret herself was there, her presence woven into the fabric of the moment. As the exhibit drew to a close, Emily and Clara stood side by side, reflecting on everything they had achieved. Clara, her voice filled with emotion, turned to Emily. "You've not just uncovered history. You've given my family closure. Margaret's story is no longer a whisper in the shadows. It's a beacon for generations to come." Emily smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. Margaret's voice had been heard, her legacy restored, and her story shared with the world. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Emily walked back to the cemetery one last time. Standing before Margaret's gravestone, she placed her hand gently on the carved willow and whispered, "We found it, Margaret. The truth lives on." The wind rustled softly through the trees, as if carrying her words into the night. Emily left the cemetery, her heart lighter and her purpose clearer than ever. Margaret's story had changed her, not just as a historian, but as a person. It was a reminder that the past, no matter how buried, always finds a way to speak, and when it does, it's up to us to listen.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so that you never miss the amazing video.